I met Rockefeller through a female attorney I knew, and I met him and I liked him, and he was a very, very smart man. He's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told me what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event, and out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. And sure enough, later, 9/11 happened. And I remember he was telling me how you're going to see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places. And there's going to be this war on terror, which is no real enemy. And the whole thing is a giant hoax, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people. And he said the end goal is to get everybody chipped, to control the whole society, to have the bankers, the elite people, the bankers and some governor controlling the world.
In earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
I'm going to talk about something that everyone longs for, but will never get to experience here on this earth, and that is world peace. So I'm going to talk about specifically why the world will never have peace. So if we go to the Holy Scriptures, we find that war actually started in heaven, which for those who don't study the Holy Scriptures, God's Word, may not understand how that can even be possible, that there can be war in heaven, because heaven is, we often think of heaven as a place of peace, as a place where there are no disputes, no disagreements, no arguments. But this is where the first place where war actually took place. And if we go to Revelation 12 verse 7, it says, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." So here we get a glimpse of what happened in heaven, which resulted in the devil and his demonic angels being cast down to the earth. And that was because they basically they started a dispute with God and his son Jesus Christ, and because of that they could not be allowed to stay in heaven, and they were thrown down to the earth. And in Matthew 10 verse 34 says, this is Jesus speaking. He said, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword." Now what Christ was saying there exactly was that the Christian church that was going to be founded upon all his teachings was going to actually cause war here on earth. Not that there was no war before that, but because there were going to be religious wars that would be fought over religious beliefs. So He said, "I have not come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword, the sword representing war." So I have a question here. What are wars fought for? I'm going to mention some of the things that wars are fought over. Um, Starting with land. Land and resources are quite a big thing that wars are fought over. Uh, Breach of treaties, maybe when two countries have an agreement and then one country breaches the agreement or the treaty, that can also lead to war. Political governance of a country, that mostly leads to civil war. We have 2 or 3 parties fighting over who's going to rule a certain country, as well as election fraud. Not that I necessarily believe in elections, because I think they are all mostly scripted, and the so-called candidates who are fighting to be either members of parliament or governors or presidents or prime ministers, they're hand selected before they even before they stand up to say, "I want to be prime minister or president," they're already chosen by someone else. It's more of a selection rather than an election. So election fraud is something also that can lead to war. An important factor is that the devil is behind all wars. It has even been said that Satan is most happy when human beings fight wars and kill each other, perhaps because we are created in God's image, and Satan loves to see this image being destroyed by bullets and bombs. So there are 4 major kingdoms mentioned in the book of Daniel. In order to understand how we came to be where we are today, we need to know our history. So these 4 kingdoms I was talking about are Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and pagan Rome. Pagan Rome then changed and became a political and religious power, hence why they have 2 keys on the Vatican flag, which represent spiritual and temporal power. In other words, pagan Rome became papal Rome. All these kingdoms all these kingdoms I mentioned so far fought wars as one succeeded the other. In order for one kingdom or empire to conquer another kingdom that was there before it, they had to fight wars. So when Papal Rome was firmly entrenched as the dominant power in Europe, it began to fight wars against those who did not acknowledge its supremacy, such as the wars against the Heruli, Vandals, and Ostrogoths. And we find that written in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, where it talks about the little horn uprooting those 3 kingdoms. When the ancient Rome was divided into 10 kingdoms, the Heruli and the Vandals and the Ostrogoths were destroyed by armies which were sent by the papacy. And some authors and historians say that the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths actually did not believe in the Trinity. Whereas obviously the little horn, which is the papacy or the Roman Catholic Church, believes in the Trinity. So it's said that that's one of the reasons why they were destroyed. But also some say that they held sway over Rome. They had a lot of power. So and they didn't agree with the papacy. That's why the papacy sent armies to destroy those three kingdoms: the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. The papacy was also involved in the Crusades, which were fought over control of Jerusalem. And it's something else as well that happened in history. I believe it happened around the 1100s. The Orthodox Church split from the Catholic Church for 2 main reasons. One, they did not believe that the Bishop of Rome, who's also known as the Pope, that he was the head of all churches, that he had some kind of supreme power over everyone else. They did not believe that. They did not believe that, the Pope was the vicar of Christ, which is what they claim. The second thing was the Sabbath. There was, believe it or not, there was a point in history when the Orthodox Church actually kept the Sabbath, even though nowadays they don't. Whereas obviously the Catholic Church didn't keep the Sabbath, they stopped keeping the Sabbath. In fact, the Catholic Church never kept the Sabbath because the Catholic Church is not a Christian church, but I won't get into that right now. So I was talking about how the papacy was involved in the Crusades, which were fought over control of Jerusalem. The papacy wanted control of Jerusalem due to its religious and geographic significance. The Arabs, the children of Ishmael, were used to fight against Christians after the papacy created the religion of Islam through Muhammad and Khadija, his first wife. Other groups that were at the receiving end of the papacy's religious wars were the Waldenses and the Albigenses. Bible believing Christians from France, these two groups, the Waldenses and the Albigenses, were Christians from France and Italy who refused to acknowledge Papal Rome as a Christian church or head of all churches. They actually separated themselves, and it was as a result of this claim by the papacy that they were supreme and they were the head of all Christians and all churches. It led to the Waldenses and the Albigenses being persecuted. So it's been said many times, that Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, the black civil activist from America. I'm talking about Martin Luther, the German monk, who was actually an Augustinian monk in the Catholic Church. It's been said many times that he started the Protestant Reformation, but it's not true. It was the Waldenses that started the Reformation, and by copying and distributing scripture, which they shared in many parts of Europe. So also John Huss, John Wycliffe, and William Tyndale also made contributions in exposing the corruptions of the Roman Catholic Church. Eventually, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in Germany in 1517, which led to many Catholics leaving the Roman Catholic Church in Europe. So I'm just trying to, it's basically almost like giving a timeline as to how we came to be where we are, where we have all these wars, and why all these wars in the past were fought, and how I know for a fact that the world, we will never experience world peace. Although, like right now in Zimbabwe, there's peace in Zimbabwe and the other neighboring countries, but the world will never have peace until Christ comes to put an end to everything that's going on here. And I'm trying to explain why that the world will never have peace. Because the devil who started war in heaven was thrown down here with his angels. So he's obviously continuing his war against God. So the power base of the Roman Catholic Church is ignorant people. And when the people woke up and realized that they had been fooled by a false Christian church, they left and started their own churches. And some of these churches were the Lutherans, the Calvinists, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Huguenots, the Anglicans, Baptists, Anabaptists, Mennonites, and many other churches. There are actually thousands of different Christian churches. Some of them call themselves Protestant churches, but actually they are not really protesting in the same way that these churches were protesting when they were first founded. So in 1540, Ignatius Loyola and 6 of his friends had an audience with Pope Paul III, who was Pope at the time, where they offered their services in order to destroy Protestantism. So besides the infiltration of Protestant churches and political organizations, Ignatius explained that his company would also start schools to educate not only Catholics but Protestants in order to mold the minds of the children so that they would be brought back to so-called Mother Church. I'm referring to the Catholic Church. So between 1545 to the year 1563, the Catholic Church, led by the Jesuits, had a series of meetings known as the Council of Trent. So we're talking of 18 years here, on and off 18 years, very long meeting, where they threshed out how they would counter the Protestant Reformation. It was then known as the Counter-Reformation. So the Council of Trent anathematized Protestants over 100 times, declaring that all the errors of the Catholic Church that had been pointed out by the Reformers, especially the sale of indulgences, they said that it was right. They hardly conceded anything. They did not admit that the Catholic Church was wrong in, let's say, selling indulgences and the priests not being allowed to marry, and the nuns and Sunday sacredness and all this paganism that was in the Catholic Church. The Jesuits, especially, who led the Council of Trent, did not admit that was wrong. Yeah, but they actually anathematized the Protestants, and basically anathematize someone is to curse someone and say that they should burn in hell, basically, to condemn someone. So Although the Council of Trent took place nearly 500 years ago, the decrees and doctrines established by the Council of Trent are still in effect today. Yes, I know, hard to believe for some of us who are Protestants, but yeah, they remember the Catholic Church says that she has never erred and she will never err. So if she says decree something, they never go back on it. So the war to destroy Protestantism would also involve war, and the first major war that was started by the Jesuits was the 30 Years' War. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the 30 Years' War, because I learned history in school, but that was never ever mentioned. But that was quite a significant war. It was the first war that was instigated by the Jesuits, and it was a war between Catholics and Protestants from 1618 to 1648. Although the war was centered in Germany, where it was deemed the Reformation had started, it involved other countries including Austria, Sweden, the Czech Republic, Spain, and France. The 30 Years' War ended with the signing of the Treaty of Westphalia, or the Treaties of Westphalia. Although there is propaganda nowadays that the Protestants lost the war, the truth is that Protestants won because they were given religious tolerance to practice their religious beliefs freely without persecution from Catholics. So, it did, this 30 Years' War gave Protestants the freedom to worship God freely according to the dictates of their own conscience. But the problem is that in areas where Catholic princes or Catholic kings ruled, if they were Protestants, they were not allowed to practice their Protestant Christian beliefs freely. Some of them actually had to move to areas that were controlled by Protestant princes or kings. That was the unfortunate thing about it. Basically what they said when the 30 Years' War ended, they said those that were in Catholic held or controlled areas had to basically remain Catholic. They were not allowed to practice true Christianity, Bible-based Christianity. They were supposed to be Catholic. And then those who were in Protestant areas could practice Protestant Christianity, which is belief in the Holy Scriptures as the only creed. So an interesting quote here from, it says here, in 1720, Michael Angelo Tamburini, who was then the general of the Jesuits, said to the Duke of Brancas, "See, my lord, from this room I govern not only Paris but China, not only China but the whole world, without anyone knowing how it is managed." So just look at the date here, 1720, and this general of the Jesuits was already claiming that the Jesuits were already in control, that he as a general of the Jesuits was already in control of the whole world. Bearing in mind I'm making this video in 2025. How many hundreds of years ago was that? They were already claiming to be in control of the world. So they must be having even more power now, because the power of the Jesuits grew over time. It is said that Loyola said to his Jesuits, "Go forth and set the world on fire," and by that he obviously meant to go as far as starting wars in order to bring back the whole world under the subjection of the Pope or the Catholic Church. So I'm just going to read just part of the extreme oath of induction of the Jesuits. I'm not going to read everything because it's quite long. So the first part I'm going to read is actually the superior talking to the Jesuits that will be taking this extreme oath of induction. So the superior, and then this is also just part of what the superior says. I'm not going to read everything because it's really, really long. So the superior says to the Jesuit who's taken the oath, "You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, and states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars." You see that? That the Jesuits are involved in starting wars. Let me read that again, just that part. It says here, "They've been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, and states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and sciences, and enjoying the blessings of peace, to take sides with the combatants and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit, who may be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected. So sometimes when you have wars, you know, there might be a civil war in a country. It's saying here that, let's say there are two sides that are fighting in a civil war. It says those two sides can actually be led by a Jesuit, and both sides knowing that the other side is led by a Jesuit, starting a war. Listen, for what reason that they do that for. It says only that the church might be the gainer in the end. All this is done so that the Catholic Church can be the gainer in the end, in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. And then it goes on to say in another paragraph, you must serve, and I'm not reading everything, you must serve the proper time as the instrument and executioner as directed by your superiors, for none can command here who has not consecrated his labors with the blood of the heretic. For without the shedding of blood, no man can be saved. So in other words, the superior says to the Jesuit that's taken the oath, you cannot be saved unless you murder or kill someone. So now I'm just going to read once again, just part of the extreme oath of induction that, and it's not all Jesuits who take this oath, by the way. I just want to make that clear. It's only because there are also different levels, just like in Freemasonry. Jesuitism also has about 4 or 5 levels. It's only when they get to the higher levels that they take this oath. And this is just part of the oath that they take, because the actual oath itself in full is too long for me to be reading here. But you can find it on the internet. If you type in the extreme oath of induction, you'll find it. But the part I read by the superior is not found on all oaths that are on the internet. You have to do a search for that. So the Jesuit will say here, I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war. You see here, they are saying that they will wage war, and you will hear for what reason. Already we read that they do that so that the Catholic Church can be the gainer in the end. It says, they'll make and wage relentless war secretly or openly against all heretics. Now, heretics are those who don't agree with the Catholic Church or don't agree with the Pope, those who only believe in the Bible, such as myself, who only hold the Bible is their creed and only don't believe in the traditions, man-made traditions such as Sunday sacredness and the scapular rosary and nuns and celibate priests, no infant baptism and all that. I don't believe in all that. I only believe what the Bible says. So according to them, I'm a heretic. It says it will be against, these wars will be against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the earth, of the whole earth. What a very Christian thing to say. And that I, listen to this next bit, will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poignard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to do so, directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. I was saying earlier, what a Christian thing to say, you know, to take such an oath to say you're going to kill someone. Yet the Holy Scriptures, John the Baptist said, do harm to no man. Now, just finishing off this oath, he says here, having the understanding that the decrees of, this is actually me speaking, having the understanding that the decrees of the Council of Trent are still in effect, and that the members of the Society of Jesus, so-called, also known as the Jesuits, have taken an oath to wage war against Protestantism until it's destroyed, we can get an understanding of why we have forever wars today. Even World War One and World War Two were religious wars, and I'll prove that to you. They were disguised as wars that were fought against Nazism and fascism. Many Protestants were killed in these two world wars, and cities such as Dresden in Germany, which were known to have high numbers of Protestants, were heavily bombed and destroyed, even though they did not, Dresden and other cities did not have any military installations. It's interesting that East Germany, remember how Germany was broken up into West and East Germany? East Germany, which interesting enough was the heartland of Martin Luther's ministry. Isn't that interesting? That the place that where Martin Luther was from within Germany was the one that was handed over to the Soviet Union, which was communist, and obviously communism is anti-Christian. So only until 1989, I believe, that's when the Berlin Wall, this wall, I can't remember what it was called now, the wall that divided West and East Germany was taken down. So Germany, so East Germany, which is where Martin Luther, I just want to make it clear, Martin Luther was from East Germany. East Germany was the one that was handed over to the Soviet Union after Germany lost the war. Can you not see here that Germany was being punished in the same way that Germany was punished during the first 30 Years' War, and I refer to it as the first 30 Years' War because some refer to World War One and World War Two as the second 30 Years' War. So and what handed over to the Soviet Union so that those in East Germany would not be allowed to practice their Protestantism freely. So, in The Art of War by Sun Tzu, a book which I've mentioned many times in my videos, we read that all warfare is based on deception. So here we see that East Germany, World War One and World War Two were also primarily about the Catholic Church fighting with Protestants, but unfortunately Protestants were asleep when this happened. In the first 30 Years' War, Catholics and Protestants understood that they were fighting each other, but in World War One and World War Two, which I already said is been said to be the second 30 Years' War, I don't think Protestants actually knew that they were fighting against the Catholic Church. By the way, I've also heard that there are many Christians. I don't know if they're still alive, some of them, but during these two wars, World War One and World War Two, there were Christians who understood that it was the papacy that started these two world wars. And because of that, when World War II ended, because of this understanding by a lot of European Christians, I'm talking about mostly Protestants, that this war was started by the Catholic Church, they then diverted the attention of those who actually knew what was going on and started pointing the finger at the Soviet Union, saying that they were a menace to the world and that they were the great threat to world peace. Now, the interesting thing as well is that Russia, or at the time it was called the USSR, the Soviet Union, the revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, was actually funded by Wall Street. It was funded by the Americans, just like Hitler was funded by the Americans as well. The fuel that was used in the planes and in the vehicles that were used by the Nazis during World War II came from Standard Oil. And the engines that were in some of many of the cars that were being used by the Nazis were made by Ford, the company that was started by Henry Ford. So history, most of what we were taught in history is a lie. All warfare is based on deception. That includes World War One and World War Two and all wars that are happening around the world. So America, which is the second beast of Revelation 13, is fighting wars on behalf of the papacy. Remember in Revelation 13, for those maybe who haven't read it, go and read it. There are two beasts that I mentioned there. There's a beast that comes out of the water, which it's like an amalgamated beast that has the characteristics of a leopard, a bear, and a lion. It comes out of the sea, and then so the first half is talking about the papacy because that beast represents the papacy. And then the second beast that's mentioned is comes up out of the earth. Now remembering that the water in in prophecy represents a highly populated area. So we know that to be the papacy because the papacy came up in Europe, which was highly populated. And then the beast that comes out of the earth represents America. So these two beasts are actually working together. So I was saying here, that second beast that comes up out of the earth in Revelation, the second part of Revelation 13, is America, which is fighting wars on behalf of the papacy. Remember that the papacy doesn't have an army, and we don't count the Swiss guards that protect the Pope as an army. Really, they can't fight wars. They are basically like bodyguards. Hence, why it has been, the U.S. has between 750 to 800 military bases around the world, more than any other country in the world. Now, there are some who, the past few years, we've been hearing a lot about China. China's coming up. China's going to be the next world power. No, that's nonsense. China, as far as I'm concerned, China is actually still controlled by the British because they lost the opium wars to the British. We know that a lot of manufacturing has been moved to China. I even have guitars in my house and clothes that will say made in China. A lot of stuff is made in China, but that does not mean that China is going to become a superpower like the US, because America has between 750 to 800 military bases around the world. China only has one in Djibouti so far that we know of. So I think it's quite clear who has more power there. And like I said, America is fighting on behalf of the papacy. China is not fighting for the papacy. And America has toppled numerous governments through the CIA, which is also known as a company, which is an offshoot of the Jesuit order. And the Jesuit order is also known as the company. So the US has also invaded many countries based on false flag events. So false flag events, basically, without going into too much detail, are inside jobs so that it can further the New World Order agenda. So in 1903, in the Chicago Tribune, Archbishop Quigley said, "When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world." We now know that a blueprint for the creation of a worldwide Pax Americana was drawn up for Dick Cheney, who was vice president under George Bush Jr., Donald Trump as well, Paul Wolfowitz. So Donald Trump, just go back, was a defense secretary. Paul Wolfowitz was Rumsfeld's deputy. Jeb Bush who was George Bush's younger brother, and Louis Libby, Dick Cheney's chief of staff. This document, entitled "Rebuilding America's Defenses," was written in September 2000 by the neo-conservative think tank Project for the New American Century, also known as PNAC. In this document, called the Project for a New American Century, it declares the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one. The process of transforming the whole world, so to bring about a new world order, will be a long one if it's absent of some catastrophic and catalyzing event. Let me read that again, because I'm actually putting some of my words in there. This document, the Project for a New American Century, declares that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. The new Pearl Harbor that they were talking about in this document, this is me speaking now. The new Pearl Harbor event that they were talking about was 9/11, a false flag event, an inside job, where remote controlled planes, this is what some say, that the planes were remote controlled, were flown into the Twin Towers, which were then destroyed by controlled demolitions. Yes, there were bombs in the building that had been placed there prior to 9/11. For those who've never researched 9/11, one way to tell that it was an inside job is that there were 2 planes that were flown into buildings, but 3 buildings collapsed. The third building was Building 7, which collapsed even though it wasn't hit by a plane. 9/11 happened so that the US would have a pretext. A pretext is an excuse for invading other countries. Now, General Wesley, retired General Wesley Clark, said that he was told just after 9/11, I think a day or two after 9/11, that 7 countries would be invaded in 5 years after 9/11. The countries he mentioned were Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, and finally Iran. Now most of these countries have been attacked so far, except for Sudan. Yes, there have been some missiles or bombs that have been dropped on Sudan. And Libya is in the process of being attacked by Israel, because as far as I'm concerned, Israel, the nation of Israel, is an extension of the US in the Middle East. Iran is the one that hasn't been attacked, but at the moment, the time of making this video, they are talking about attacking Iran, even though Iran hasn't, is not attacking its neighbors. So the U.S. got involved in World War One because an American ship called the Lusitania was sunk by Germans, which was a planned event involving Winston Churchill, who was an admiral at the time, attacked Pearl Harbor, which the U.S. knew was going to happen because they had radar, of course, and they had also put Japan. They provoked Japan basically by putting Japan on an oil embargo. World War II is also, like I already said, sometimes called the Second Years' War, having been fought from 1914 to 1945. So the US got into a war with Vietnam because they claimed that one of their ships had been attacked by the Vietnamese in the Gulf of Tonkin, which turned out to be false. The US invaded Libya, claiming that Gaddafi was slaughtering his people, then invaded Syria on the pretext that President Assad was killing Syrians, which was false. They even said that he was basically poisoning Syrians with biological weapons or some kind of gas. Then they said that they were fighting terrorists in Syria, whom they created and funded, because ISIS actually and Al Qaeda were created by the CIA, and some have said that there's a video on YouTube where they say that ISIS stands for Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. I've seen a document on the internet which said that peace was not conducive to the world, and I've actually, read that document. And then when I went around looking for it now, I couldn't find it. It's almost like it seems like it's been scrubbed from the internet. The document was basically talking about how peace is not conducive to the world. That's why we have these wars that are never ending. If they end in one country, we then have another country where the wars are taking place. But I think I've already given enough evidence of why all this is happening. Is because all this is done so that the Catholic Church can be the gainer in the end. Other wars being fought around the world involve countries that are trying to unshackle themselves from the grip of neo-colonialism, such as African countries that are being invaded by Boko Haram, which I suspect was created and is being funded by the CIA, and other terrorist organizations that were created and are funded by CIA and Mossad, which like Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda and many others. So Mossad's motto is by way of deception thou shalt do war, very similar to the art of war deception strategy. Israel is also fighting wars on many fronts, as it seems to extend its territory beyond the borders that were agreed through the Balfour Declaration. Remember that the United Kingdom handed over Israel to the Israelis. These European Jews, who some say come from Khazaria, which is actually in Ukraine, because the United Kingdom actually had control over Jerusalem and parts of Israel. There is what is known as the Greater Israel Project, where Israel wants to extend its territory from the Nile River to the Euphrates, encompassing significant portions of Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and parts of Turkey. There are some who believe that Jews are the ones ruling the world. I don't believe this personally. I believe that the fourth kingdom upon the world is Roman Catholic Church. We started off as pagan Rome and became papal Rome. That's who's really ruling the world. But of course, they use many fronts. So it's incorrect to say that the Jews rule the world. War is also used as a depop tactic. When I say depop, look up what depop means if you don't understand, because it kills many people. I mean, World War I and World War II killed millions of people. And I said many of those who were fighting in those wars, remember that America was also involved in that war, and there were many Americans were Protestant at the time. And of course, now that we've had the inroads of Darwinian evolution into the schools and this nonsense about the Big Bang. A lot of Westerners don't believe in God anymore and don't believe that the Bible is God's word. So we are at war right now. Even as Christians, we're at war. We're in a spiritual war, which also manifests itself in physical ways. But most Christians are asleep. So in Syria, where a jihadist regime removed Assad's government, Christians are being persecuted. All this is being done so that the Catholic Church can be the gainer in the end. So the real reason for war is that the Catholic Church is attempting to destroy Christianity and return the world to how it was during the Dark Ages. Except for this time, the difference will be that although during the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church ruled mostly Europe, now they want to rule the whole world. And remember that when Ignatius Loyola had his meeting with Pope Paul III, he promised that they would go anywhere on the command of the Pope to basically take back the whole world, to get everyone to bow before the papacy and the Pope. As we see in Revelation 13, verse 3 and verse 8, it says that the whole world will wander after the beast and worship the beast because of this counter-reformation that's being done by the Jesuits. So the Catholic Church, is attempting to remove all resistance to it ruling the world, whether that resistance is Christianity or another religion. One of the religions that's being the Catholic Church is fighting against is Islam. Even though the Catholic Church created Islam, Islam rebelled against the papacy, and you can read that in Alberto Rivera's comic book called The Prophet. The Catholic Church wants all religions to bow down to her and acknowledge her as the supreme ruler. And one of the ways this will be done to get everyone to acknowledge her as the head of all churches and all nations will be to introduce and enforce Sunday law, which the Roman Catholic Church says is the mark of her authority. Sunday laws will be brought in through the pretext of fighting climate change. It will be said that resting on Sunday will bring down CO2 emissions and to allow workers to rest. Along with Sunday laws will come CBDCs. Those who refuse to comply will be punished with no buying and no selling sanctions, as mentioned in Revelation 13. Yeah, so I hope that explains. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't pray for peace. We should always be praying for peace because God can intervene in the places where fighting is going on or where Christians are being persecuted, such as in Syria. God can intervene, but the wars will always be there because they can shift and be fought in different parts of the world. Yeah, but the only way we'll have peace, or the only way that wars will end, is when Christ comes. So we should actually be praying for that and getting ourselves ready for that.